Welcome to this introductory video to the City Planners by Margaret Atwood. This is a very brief introduction and an overview of what I'm doing in class this year. So, we're going to have 15 poems. They're going to be stuck into a portfolio or a kind of scrapbook, if you like. And this portfolio is going to have 30 pages in it. And within each double page spread, on the left-hand side, we're going to stick the poem, and on the right-hand side, we're going to make notes and analysis, annotations, draw images, stick pictures, whatever. Okay, so once you've got your portfolio and it's ready to go, stick in the first poem, which is The City Planners by Margaret Atwood. That's going to be poem number 1. Stick that in on the left-hand side, and then once you've done your couple of read-throughs, I want you just to think about these 4 questions. You don't have to answer them yet. You might want to make a couple of small notes, but save some space for later. There are 4 key questions that you've really got to ask yourself for every single poem we look at. And these are the basics, the real minimum that you must understand for each of the 15 poems. What is the poem about? What happens in the poem? Is the poem emotional in any way? What is the tone? How does it feel? What is the poetic form? And why might this form be significant? And in your opinion, what is the main message of the poem? So these 4 questions for number 3, 4, 5, 6 on the screen are going to be central to every single poem. If you don't know those 4 things, then it's not a good place to start to analyze and interpret and write essays and prepare for exams, etc. So we'll just have one quick read through now. Cruising these residential Sunday streets in dry August sunlight, what offends us is the sanities. The houses in pedantic rows, the planted sanitary trees assert levelness of surface like a rebuke to the dent in our car door. No shouting here or shatter of glass, nothing more abrupt than the rational whine of a power mower cutting a straight swath in the discouraged grass. But though the driveways neatly sidestep hysteria by being even, the roofs all display the same slant of avoidance to the hot sky. Certain things, the smell of spilled oil, a faint sickness lingering in the garages, a splash of paint on brick surprising as a bruise, a plastic hose poised in a vicious coil. Even the too fixed stare of the wide windows give momentary access to the landscape behind or under the future cracks in the plaster when the houses capsized will slide obliquely into the clay seas, gradual as glaciers, that right now nobody notices. That is where the city planners, with the insane faces of political conspirators, are scattered over unsurveyed territories, concealed from each other, each in his own private blizzard. Getting directions, they sketch transitory lines, rigid as wooden borders, on a wall in the white vanishing air, tracing the panic of suburb order in a bland madness of snow. The speaker is Margaret Atwood, we can assume. She's driving through the neighbourhood, through some suburban landscape, and she's commenting on what she sees. It's a Sunday in August, and she talks about the things that we think of as normal and sane, but she presents them as insane and unnatural and without life. And she creates a kind of eerie and haunting setting, which is unusual for a sunny day in August. Cruising these residential Sunday streets in dry August sunlight, what offends us is the sanities, the houses in pedantic rows, the planted sanitary trees. So, she's being sarcastic here. You can sense the irony. She's talking about what we think of as normal, rows of houses, as we've looked at in the original pictures. She is presenting these as insane. She does not agree with this style of city planning. She thinks it is uniformed, controlling, manipulating nature, and it is not the correct way to go about things. She describes the houses as pedantic. Pedantic is when you give some attention to detail, perhaps too much attention to detail to something. And perhaps she is criticizing the way we focus on developing our front gardens and our houses and making our streets all perfect and smooth and everything orderly. And really what we should be giving attention to is the environment and living in harmony with nature. We'll get to that later. She talks about the trees. They are not natural, they are not wild, but they are planted. They are part of the man-made structures of the suburbs. She describes the trees as sanitary. I find this unusual. I would say this is a subversion of how we should look at nature. It's the opposite of natural if something is sanitized. Through personification, Atwood criticizes the levelness of everything. She talks about the levelness of surface, roads, bushes, white picket fences, windows. She looks at everything as controlled and smooth. Again, she thinks this is telling her off. It is rebuking her for having a dent in her car door. The dent in the car door can be seen as a contrast to the environment that she is exploring on this Sunday afternoon. She comments on the lack of life in the suburbs. She talks about there's no shouting here, there's no shatter of glass, there's nothing abrupt. And again, she's subverting what we take for granted as sane. She's saying that, okay, it's calm, it's silent, it's tranquil. But is this what we really want? Is this what we want to strive to achieve? Silence and calmness and quietness with nobody talking and no life? Then she talks about the one sound that you can hear in this place, which is the whine of a power mower cutting grass. Again, she uses this language of psychology. So earlier she talked about the sanities of the straight houses and the straight rows. Here she talks about the rational whine of the lawnmower. So to the person cutting the grass, wherever he or she is, they are committing a very rational Sunday afternoon act. They're cutting the grass because it's the rational thing to do. We can't let the grass grow. But of course, Atwood, as an environmental activist, is really saying that what we should be doing is letting the grass grow and encouraging nature and helping everyone live more harmoniously alongside nature, because we are part of nature. To her, this place is an irrational nightmare where nature is overwhelmed by human control, and this is crazy. This is a crazy way to organize our living situation. In the second stanza, she takes us further on the journey through the suburbs, and she starts to point out evidence of madness, evidence of destruction, and she's perhaps suggesting that we shouldn't be so controlling. She starts stanza 2 with a conjunction, but though. She's contrasting something in this second stanza. But though the driveways neatly sidestep hysteria by being even, the roofs all display the same slant of avoidance to the hot sky. So we've got that reference there to climate change. The sky is heating up, yet the people here would rather stay in their houses and avoid that truth that's staring them in the face from above. People would rather turn their backs on the real problems that are facing us as a global community and hide away in the houses, avoiding the hot sky. Atwood goes on to explain that although everything seems perfectly constructed, there are many details here that suggest that we cannot contain everything. She also alludes here to many items that contribute to climate change. So she starts about halfway down this stanza where she talks about the smell of oil. We've all smelt that smell as we're walking down the street. That smell of oil just lingering in the background. She describes it as a sickness. So perhaps she's referring there to our relentless use of fossil fuels, and she is perhaps saying that this is a sickness. The world is ill because of our behavior. And in the suburbs where she's driving around on this Sunday afternoon, she can just smell it in the distance. But this is a really good use of imagery. She then uses a simile to compare a splash of paint on brick, surprising her like a bruise. So again, we've got this kind of abusive language. The bruise, the sickness, we're damaging the earth. We're hurting our environment. And it is evident even when we try to hide it and control everything. So there's this splash of paint on the wall, which again is that visual imagery of destruction. We've got the bruise simile, as if the environment we're living in is damaged. Atwood draws our attention to this hosepipe, and she uses the metaphor of a snake, which we often associate with evil, sinister, poisonous doings. She uses the word poised, which makes me think it is ready to go, it is ready to waste water, and what it's shooting out is actually a poison to the world, because it's a wasteful attitude towards water. If someone somewhere in the world is dying because they do not have enough water, should we be using hose pipes in our gardens to water the plants? She might be saying that this kind of behavior is actually quite evil. She then says, the final line in stanza 3, the future cracks in plaster. And there's a tone of despair beginning to emerge. Notice the lack of punctuation. The first two stanzas had a fairly similar structure. I think the first stanza is 12 lines and the second stanza is 10 lines. All free verse. The form of the poem is free verse. But at this moment, the structure begins to tumble and break and crack. And I believe that this form, this change in form, mirrors what she's saying about the destruction of our environment. The poem starts to fall apart as well. At this moment, the future cracks in the plaster. The enjambment, which is when you don't have punctuation at the end of the line and the sentence just flows onto the following line, the enjambment goes into stanza 4, and she says the houses will capsize. So this is to mean tumble over like boats, suggesting the frailty of this suburban reality. She says the houses will slide into the sea, clay sea. It's like a rock sea. So you can imagine all this cement turning into an ocean now. So it's quite a surreal, haunting sort of nightmare image starting to emerge. She talks about the suburbs and the way we live at the moment decaying gradually. And now she brings in her very explicit connections to climate change. She talks about the glaciers gradually melting that we don't notice. She is saying, open your eyes to the real damage that's happening around the world. Towards the end of the poem, in the final 3 stanzas, the enjambment continues and the tumbling, despairing destruction really starts to take hold. And she blames the city planners for all of this. She doesn't blame the people living in the houses in the suburbs, because the majority of people are making decisions based on what they are given. We make decisions based on what's in front of us. We might choose to live in the city, the suburbs, or the countryside. There's not many other options. So this is where she really brings her attack and her political statement to the front of the poem. The city planners. These are the people she's blaming. She says the city planners, when things start to go wrong, will appear with their insane faces of political conspirators. So she is saying that this is a governmental decision that has led us to this ignorant and blind suburban living. She's saying because of the way our cities are built, because of the way our roads and neighborhoods are designed, we think a certain way has an influence on our behavior. So here they come. The city starts to fall apart and the city planners arrive. They are scattered over unsurveyed territories, meaning natural land. And they are not working together, but they are concealed from each other. The people planning towns and cities are doing it for their personal gain, their own private investment. They are each in their own private blizzard. They are guessing. They are sketching lines. Now I think this final image of wooden borders is a reference to the white picket fences around gardens. They're sketching transitory lines, rigid as wooden borders on a wall in the white vanishing air. So the white picket fence will get lost in the white snow as the world starts to tumble, as the glaciers melt. And the final two lines are really open for interpretation because I think they're the most abstract two lines in the poem. It's oxymoronic to say a bland madness, but perhaps that really is the central message of the poem. The suburbs, to Margaret Atwood, are a bland madness. The suburbs, to Margaret Atwood, are a place where there's no life, it's quiet, it's calm, but really, in this calmness is a deep, deep madness. If you'd like to test yourself, here are a few technical and comprehension questions to see if you were following the poem or if you'd like to do some revision. This poem is not in isolation in its criticism of the suburbs. Many, many films and TV shows and other books and plays have been written about these themes. And one such film is Blue Velvet, which was directed by David Lynch. If you would like to go a bit further with this poem, there is a quiz testing you on an analysis of the introduction of Blue Velvet. And I also have a line-by-line analysis of the poem, which goes into a lot more detail of the irony, the imagery, the sarcasm, the real technical aspect of the poem. And I also have an example 1,000-word essay at the end of this PowerPoint. So if you would like access to that, please follow the link beneath this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. I hope it's all made sense to you. Feel free to comment, and I would really love to see your first 2-page spread of your portfolio when it is completed. So just to recap on the portfolio, what I'm asking my class to do is create 2 pages per poem in a scrapbook. The left-hand side of the page will be the poem, stuck in and annotated. The right-hand side of the page will be all of your notes and comments and any analysis you've done and any of your own interpretation. And those 2 pages will be a really, really good revision tool for you when it comes to preparing for the IGCSE exams. And hopefully it will be quite a creative and fun process to make those portfolios.